Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Hey everybody, welcome. How's everybody doing today? I hope you said great. I apologize, I'm wearing my 4 eyes today, but had some contact lens problems. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour or so. Let me get this stuff set up here. Never see as well with my glasses on, I'll tell you for sure. Okay, there we go. All right, my name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour or so. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts paranormal investigation team based out of Sacramento, California. We are 45 strong up and down the state. That means that if you think you have a paranormal problem, we can help you. It might take us a while, but we can help you. That being said, welcome everybody. We have a great show lined up. Actually, if you need to find us, before I forget to tag that, you can find us all over social media. Just Google California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team, and you will find us. So, that being said, now we can get going. That being said, I have some great guests lined up for you tonight. Margie Kay and, I believe, Violet Wisdom are with us tonight. And this is something that I've always, for a long time with my own paranormal group, I struggled with, was finding somebody that could research that knew how to research a haunted location. And Margie and Violet do just that. And Margie also has been a paranormal investigator for quite a while, and she's very good at what she does. So they're going to be telling us about their investigations and the research they've done on some houses and things like that. So without further ado, let me bring them in. Hello, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for
Hello.
having us.
Yeah, you're welcome. I had to adjust my camera before I came in. Look at this. It looks like I'm sitting on the floor. So tell me about you guys.
Oh, gosh. Why don't you go first, Violet?
Oh my, yeah. So, hi, I'm Violet Wisdom, and gosh, I've been working with Margie since 2016, I believe. Not crazy. I do historic research. I'm also a writer. I've been doing historic research since 2010, and I've researched about a little over. I think I'm at about 52 properties at this point.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I've been a paranormal investigator for about 40 years. I investigate everything from ghosts to UFOs to cryptids. And I also have own the Onyx Network, which has multiple shows on it. They're all about unexplained phenomena. And I'm a writer as well. And so we got together. I mean, we've been working together for some time on different projects. And it so happened that Violet was the manager for a house that I owned that was the house where Ginger Rogers was born.
Okay.
And we fixed that house up. Took quite a while to restore it. And then we opened it as a museum. And so she ran the museum. And we soon found out that house was haunted. Now, that wasn't something I was looking for. It just was. And so we had a connection there. But one day I was in the office and the thought came to me about doing another book. And I thought, with her background, with Violet's background in research, we could combine this and do a book about how to research a haunted house. And I took a look online, and I couldn't find anything like it out there.
Right.
Not a thing. And so we decided to collaborate on that.
Interesting. How does one do that? I know when I've done it on my own, I'm going to the planning commission, trying to see what was there before, things like that. How does one do that research?
So you start with what you know, and so it's kind of interesting how we wrote the book. We split it into two parts. So the first half of the book is just how to research step by step what those resources are. You can get some online. You're going to have to go to an actual library, a historical society, break all that down. But really, where you want to start with is what you know. You could literally know nothing more than the address. You have to know the legal address as well. So that's going to be the county, the region, the parcel. Just those two things will get you started. Any other information you can get, you just start collecting it and go to the resources that we put out and go from there.
Because I know an experience, because I'm a journalist by trade, and you're going through microfiche because I mean, if there's something that horrible that had happened in the house, there's certainly going to be a story of it somewhere. So it's a lot of microfiche and stuff like that, right?
Absolutely, a lot of microfilm. We're every month that passes, we're growing the digital database because all these periodicals, whether they're a newspaper, a magazine, they have to actually be physically digitized to be able to be found online. So there's more and more coming online. But like, for instance, our local paper that we rely on a lot for research, I think there's about 4 years that you can find online. And this paper's been around since the 1800s. So unless you're researching just that 4-year span, you have to go to the library.
Okay. So can you tell me about some investigations that you guys have done where research has proven, your theory that something has happened in that house, particular has happened in the house?
Well, we actually covered that in the book. We took a house that I lived in when I was a teenager in Springfield, Missouri, and used that for our research project. And I explain in the book how I knew the minute we walked in that house when we moved in that it was haunted because this cold, just extreme cold walked right through me and my mother at the same time. And I said, Mom, this house is haunted. She goes, yeah, I know. And it turned out to be the most haunted house I've ever been in, bar none. After all the investigations I've done, hundreds of investigations for other people, and I've owned other houses that are haunted. I have 3 right now that are haunted, but that one takes the cake. So I thought this is perfect because there was so much activity there. There had to be a reason. There had to be a history. And it was an older home. We were told when we were kids that it was a Civil War hospital at one time. Turns out that wasn't true. Violet found that out, but it was a doctor owned it, and it was a makeshift hospital for a time. So that you find stories from neighbors and things like that are not always 100% accurate, but they can give you a basis to start with. And oh gosh, we had all kinds of things happening. We had apparitions show up. My sister was the first one who was affected. We heard her screaming the very first night we were in that house, and we ran down the hall to her room. And we didn't have the beds fixed up yet. We just had our mattresses on the floor. First day we moved in. And we ran to the door, and we see her lying in her bed, and then we said, oh, what's wrong? What's wrong, Alice? And her voice comes from the closet over to the side. She says, that's not me. And then the bedclothes just slowly go down. And so we're like, oh no, what are we in for here? And it just continued. There were faces in the walls. I saw a woman being murdered one time in my mirror in my bedroom by an older woman was killing another one with a knife. Of course, the typical stomping steps up and down the staircase, the doors slamming, things being thrown. It was just like a movie. It was absolutely like a movie. So we used that house to investigate. So it was interesting.
Now, it sounds like before you were living in this house, you were aware of ghosts back then. I mean, before then, right?
Oh, I was. Yeah,
Okay.
I saw my first ghost when I was 10 or 11. This head just the head was floating at the foot of my bed. It was a man, and he was talking, and I couldn't hear him. And so I screamed, and my sister saw it too. She screamed. My dad came upstairs. He said, what's wrong? Well, there was a floating head down there before you turn the light out. And so he got this album out of pictures and said, does it match anything in here? And I picked a man out. Turns out it was my grandfather who died before I was born. And I'd never seen him, and I'd never seen that picture. And he says, oh, well, he's trying to contact you. Well, it turns out I really wasn't able to contact him again for many years. But by the time I was like 40 years old, I was then able at that point to contact any of my ancestors and speak to them, get information.
In 40 years as an investigator, what is the main common thing that you found, in these investigations, or is it different every time?
Well, they're pretty much different every time because it's obviously different spirits that are involved and different people living in the house that actually could trigger things, by their actions or by, what they're talking about. But I'd say the most common thing that a lot of people are not aware of is that usually if a house is haunted, it is being done by a spirit of someone who owned the house originally, or who was very attached to the house and lived there a long time. That is usually the case.
Okay. Now, a question I have, you see all this stuff on TV all the time, because of course they want drama. So, you get a lot of people, and I know I get a lot of calls where people will say, hey, I know it's demonic. I know it's demonic. We just want a cleansing. We just want a cleansing. How do you handle calls like that?
I get them sometimes, and what I do is I remote view the property before I even head out to it because I want to know what's there, and that's a skill that I've had for years. So usually it is not demonic. It is usually a poltergeist, with a young teen or a preteen that may be causing things to move about, or get thrown, things like that. I've had some serious poltergeist cases. It's usually a teenager, or a negative entity, or a person who when they crossed over, they don't change their personalities. It's the same personality. And if they were a bad person in life, they'll be a bad person in death. But maybe 1% of the time, maybe you might go down the demonic road.
Is it hard to convince people otherwise? Because I know, like I said, that's what I hear. Come cleanse this, come do this, come do that. And I'm trying to tell them, like you, I'm trying to tell them, I don't know what we're dealing with. We cannot just come in and cleanse a house, until we know exactly what we're dealing with. Oh, well, we'll go with someone else. Yeah. Click, and then that's it.
Well, people get things in their minds, especially all of these TV shows and movies. If something negative is happening, they want to immediately go to it being a demon. And so if I remote view something and I do see that there's something very, very negative there, I will refer that person to a demonologist because I can get rid of negative entities, but I don't want to go down that road. We all have our limitations, and I would prefer to refer that to somebody who does that on a regular basis.
Okay. Hey,
and they know how to
in the line of work that you're in, because I know you're also into real estate, right?
Yeah.
Is it helpful? Because California, the law is if there was a death in the house, we have to tell, that it has to be told to people. So does knowing how to do this research and working with Margie help a lot with these houses that you might be selling or dealing with, as far as selling them?
Actually, that has not come up. It has not come up yet. In our state of Missouri, we do not have to disclose if a place is haunted. And Violet, you'd have to address if a person died. I don't know about that.
Right. No. So every state can have its own regulations when it comes to real estate disclosures. And most states do not require you disclose a death. A few states will require something heinous if it's recent, say last 3 years.
Okay.
So by law, you don't have to disclose that. But if if it's in fairly recent history, or even 10, 20 years, if it was something that made the news, people were talking about it, people are probably still talking about it. The neighbors definitely know about it. So by being upfront with that situation, you don't end up with someone buying a home and then now you have a very unhappy buyer.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So when you go, so Margie, when you go into a house, and does Violet usually go with you? You know, when you do go to the house to check out the property and stuff, or is this an after call to say, "Hey, Violet, I'm in this property and I need to get some research done."
Actually, we have only investigated one haunted house together, and that was the
Okay.
Ginger Rogers house. Um, but we do have some things planned in the future
Mm-hmm.
with investigations, and I'm sure that that she'll be involved in that.
Mm-hmm.
If not filming,
That could be.
doing that part. Yeah.
Yeah, a jack of all trades.
Mhm.
One of the projects that we kind of did together, it was just more of, gosh, I'm curious. I want to know. I did research our office. I
Oh yeah.
dug up
Yeah.
all the history on our office, and it's an interesting building because it's a commercial building that could also be residential. It's just a really interesting place. And one of the things we noticed at the office is that there'd be these little piles of like dust right by the front door when you come in. You come in the morning, no one's been there, and there are these just little piles of dust. And Margie had heard a swishing sound before in that area. I thought that's really strange. I'm curious. So I dug up all the history on the building, and it was a hair salon for a really long time. This one woman had her hair salon there. And so we were able to explain why we have these little piles of dust. She's sweeping. That's what she did. She cut your hair,
Very
sweep
cool.
the floor.
That's pretty awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah.
When you go into a haunted building, Margie, what's your approach with the client? Especially, after doing your remote read, you got a pretty good idea of what's going on. What are the first steps that you take when you go in?
Well, I'll do an interview with them first, usually on the phone,
Uh
and
huh.
then when I get there, if I have a team with me, we'll just sit down and ask more questions and ask about recent activity. Well, what's been going on? Has anybody in the house been messing around with the spirit board? Um, are they calling in people? Are they trying to contact the dead? A lot of times, people will do that, or their teenagers will do that, their kids, without them knowing it.
Right.
So if and then you want to know if there's a person who they would consider to be a target, who's the one that's having most of the experiences. So we want to focus on that person to see why that might be. We'll just ask them all sorts of questions. What kind of work do you do? What are your hobbies? What are you seeing in the home, and how long has it been going on? And also how long they've lived in the property. So in some cases, I've oddly been investigated a couple of houses recently where the people had lived in there for some time, like maybe 20 years, 25 years, and then all of a sudden things start acting up. And when that happens, it's usually they're remodeling the house because it seems that spirits who are attached to properties don't like changes.
Right.
And I did a case a few years ago where the woman's husband was on a ladder, and he had been doing changes, painting and new carpet and all of that. He was outside working on a light, and someone physically moved his ladder and made him fall off the ladder, but there was nobody
Wow.
there. And so they asked me to come check it out. And I saw an older woman who was very mad about them changing everything.
Mm-hmm.
So they stopped making the changes and just decided to live with it. And she quit. So they didn't
Makes
have any
sense.
problems after that.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
What do you think about all this? Being from your background, real estate, and doing those, doing the investigating that you do, Violet. Do you believe in this stuff?
I don't have the abilities that Margie has.
Uh huh.
I'm a happy little nerd in front of a computer,
Yeah.
but I've had a few experiences that I can't explain them. So outside of doing some research and maybe finding out who did it.
Okay. Okay. Well, because the reason why I ask is because there's a lot of people that don't want to believe no matter what. I mean, they could be slapped in the face by something unseen, and they're going to go, "Oh no, it was a bug that hit me in the face and stuff." Do you find that frustrating? You guys find that frustrating when you run into somebody like that who's just a total skeptic?
Yes, very, very frustrating. And it's difficult to deal with, say, in a family where there's obviously a haunting going on
Mhm.
and family members are experiencing it, but there's one family member who doesn't and
Mhm.
doesn't. And if he does see something, it's usually a man. Okay, I'm just saying.
Mhm.
If he doesn't see it, he has blocked it out, and then if he does see it, he says, "Oh, that didn't happen," and
Mhm.
they just don't acknowledge that anything's going on at all. I mean, there are just some people who cannot deal with anything supernatural. These are
Mhm.
usually left brain people who are
Right.
just blinders on, and they can't get it.
So what
Yeah,
happens
so
in a
it's hard to
situation
deal
like
with.
that? So what happens in a situation like that? You got people in the family that are believing, but he's not. So how are you able to calm things down in that situation?
Well, I usually explain to that person that even if they're not experiencing anything, the rest of the family is, and they just want to get some peace. And I just say, why don't you go do something else while
Mhm.
I deal with the rest of the family? And then that way they feel comfortable in talking with me and explaining everything that's going on because a lot of times they don't want to talk about it in front of that person who's a skeptic
Mhm.
because they know what they're thinking. They know they think they're
Mhm.
crazy.
Mhm.
And so it's just much better if I can talk them into going outside or go and do something else and leave for a while.
Now, the question I have too: do you interview everybody in the house individually, or do you interview them together?
It depends on the situation.
Okay.
If it's very young children, I don't interview them separately.
Mhm.
I will talk to them and I'll tell everyone else to be quiet
Mhm.
while during the interview.
Mhm.
Um, but if they're older, then yeah,
Mhm.
I'll separate them so they can get the whole story.
Okay. Victoria, how long does it take for you to do research on a house or a building?
I have, I can do a dozen pages worth of history on a building in a couple weeks.
Okay.
I've spent over a year on projects before, and that comes out as a book after over a year. Real
Mhm.
often, when I'm hired to do research on a project, it's because the homeowner wants to know something very specific.
Mhm.
And so I have to tell them up front what you're wanting to know might not exist, but
Mhm.
I'm I'm going to find some really fantastic things. Um, but I'll do everything I can to find out. And so sometimes that can take a really long time, or sometimes I say sometimes if you are really doing a deep dive in a property, so like you can do a preliminary history, which is kind of an overview of the history, and that's going to take up, like I said, like a dozen pages. Or you
Mhm.
can do a really deep dive where you find everyone who's ever lived there, everything you can about them, changes to the property, were there additions, were there removals, all of this massive amount of history. And you'll find something that's just intriguing,
Mhm.
and I can't let that go. So as long as I have a client that is willing to wait while I go down the rabbit hole and dig deep into something, I can spend a lot of time on one. So,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
I tell people if you're doing your own research and You have 2 hours a month. Do the research. You're going to find stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it might take you several years to find a lot, but you're still going to get information. So
Mm-hmm.
it's as much time as you are willing to put into it.
Margie, do you do any after you do your remote read? Do you do any research before you go out to the house, or are you going out like cold?
Uh, up up till now, I simply do a remote viewing to see what's going on and who's there
Mm-hmm.
and what entities are there. But with especially with older properties,
Mm-hmm.
I it would probably be helpful to know a little bit about the history before we walk into it. But the other thing is,
Mm-hmm.
as a psychic, I want to pick up whatever energies are there and spirits that might be there that maybe don't belong to the property. Maybe something else happened outside of the house and they're walking through. I mean, I've got
Mm-hmm.
some cases where that has occurred. And I want to see what I can see first
Mm-hmm.
before, and then have the person doing the research doing that separately.
Okay.
Now, my daughter used to be her role, digging into the history,
Mm-hmm.
until now that Violet and I have partnered up.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows? We may run across another good project to write a book about. One or two or three, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. I haven't done anything, in the past few months because I've been so busy with the network and getting books published for people and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll be getting back at it in the springtime because we have some places to go check out
Mm-hmm.
as soon as it
Mm-hmm.
warms up.
If somebody wants to research their own property, where should they start?
Again,
Yeah.
start with what you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you can. I always say talk to anyone who's willing to talk to you, but take it with a grain of salt, because urban legends they're really fun
Yeah.
and they're great, but they're not always accurate, and that might send you down the wrong direction. So
Mm-hmm.
write it down and then do your own research. Even some of our old history books, like in the 1980s, it was it was almost like a fad to do a print of your town's history.
Mm-hmm.
Those books are all over America, and they're full of lots of lovely stories that have, some of them are 100% true, but I'll tell you, some of them are probably only a little bit true. So they're a great place to start. Um, yeah, just write everything down, talk to people. One thing I will caution is when you're talking to people, whether you're going to interview someone to get more information
Mm-hmm.
about a resident, or you're just talking to the neighbors or maybe family members of the people that used to own your home, you might not want to throw out why you're doing
Right.
the research if it's because you believe the house is haunted, because some people just can't handle that and they'll be done with you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. I did one house out in Rockland area out here that they were having all kinds of activity. The kids were seeing stuff. They had a ball of fire go down the center of the house that they saw. And
Mm.
we go across the street and we find out from the neighbor that the neighbor had uncovered three tombstones on their property.
Aha.
And then going back through
Wow.
research, it was one of these old cemetery plots. And that's where it
Yeah,
all led to.
so
Yeah.
back in the day, cemetery plots were on your property.
Mm-hmm.
You know, cemeteries as we know them are, I mean, I say they're fairly new, but they were usually in town.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them, they weren't formed until mid to late 1800s. And if
Mm-hmm.
you lived out in a rural area, you buried your family had a small burial plot
Mm-hmm.
right there on the property. So, and those are protected, by the way. So if someone does find one, you have to find out. There's federal laws, and then there are state laws as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I agree with you 100%. Not, like when we went across the street, all we wanted to find out because we had heard a rumor that they had uncovered tombstones, so we didn't say anything about why we were going across the street. We just said, hey, we're really interested in old graveyards, and then we heard that you uncovered some tombstones, and that's where we were able to start there, and then go back across the street and go, oh wow, this is probably what's going on. It's a big plot of land, that at one time been a cemetery. Have you ever, Margie? Have you ever run into a situation where you just got people in there that just freak? Something happened where you realize that maybe like that. Oh, your house is sitting on a cemetery or anything
Oh
like that.
yeah. Yeah, we have one right here in Independence. A business owner had a haunted business, and I
Mhm.
investigated that. And then she says, "By the way, could you come check our house out?" And because I've had all kinds of activity, and I found out it was built right on top of a native burial ground, and that is not good. That is never
Mhm.
good. There's I've dealt with a lot of Native American guardians in
Mhm.
spirit form who guard that land and that property, whatever was there, and they are not going anywhere.
Mhm.
So,
Absolutely.
uh, yeah, if the people are, it's usually a developer who does it, and in this
Mhm.
case, that is the case, where they didn't even move the bodies; they just built over them,
Mhm.
and that's like the worst thing you can do. And I said, no, there's nothing I can do about this. I can't get rid of this.
Mhm.
So you're going to have to move. That's your only choice.
Which brings me to the next question I have. Something that's attached to the land. How difficult is that to remove something that was on that land before? I've got a fisherman on my on my property who passed away when this was Riverland, and he's still here. So how hard is it to extract
Mm.
something like that?
That's difficult because if they're attached, they don't want to leave. They want to experience what they were doing there in life, and
Yeah.
uh, fishermen get very attached to that sport. I know I'm married to one,
Uh huh.
so that's difficult to deal with. But you want a medium, somebody like me, to come in and converse with
Mhm.
this person and explain to them. First of all, you want to find out if they know they've crossed over, because sometimes they don't.
Right.
And then if they do, tell them, you're just wasting time here. You might want to go ahead and go into the light, look for your spirit guide, look for your family members because they're there, and go
Mhm.
you know go towards the light. And usually I can get them to go ahead and go and cross over. Now sometimes I run into a pesky spirit who just wants to play pranks once in a while, like the one that lives in the
Mhm.
house I'm in right now.
Mhm.
And we've been here for 39 years almost. And he showed up at the beginning, and then every few years he does something crazy.
Mhm.
And then in between time, nothing. But no, there's no getting rid of that guy. He is he is stuck here. He says, "Yeah." He says, "I know I'm dead, and I'm just not ready to go anywhere else." So,
Interesting. Interesting.
yeah, but he's not hurting anybody. If he
Right.
was, it
Right.
would be a different story.
Right. Is there? I mean, when you come into a situation like that, let's just say someone doesn't, like for our Woodland Opera House, okay, the guy that set the fire is still in there. The fireman that got killed in there is still in there. He's there
Mm.
because the guy that set the fire is there. That killed him is there. He's chasing him around for eternity. But the guy that set the fire doesn't want to cross over because he's afraid. So, what can you
Oh
do in a
yeah.
situation like that?
Well, that is a difficult situation
Mhm.
because you've got guilt, you've got anger, you've got fear, all of these emotions that are keeping the energy trapped there.
Mhm.
And I would imagine that a lot is going on in that place
Yeah.
because of the history.
It's very busy.
So
Yeah.
yeah, you have to work on clearing the negative energy first, and then
Mhm.
address the entities, the spirits. I mean, in my opinion, that's what I would do. I would
Mhm.
sage the area. I would burn
Mhm.
sage. I would bring in some crystals. And I would just clear that energy so that you can deal directly with the people, because they're feeding off of that negative energy.
Mhm.
And just try to release that first so that they can cross over.
Okay. Okay. What's the most interesting case that you've ever done? You've been doing this for 40 years. There has to be one that stands out.
Well, besides the house that we talk about in the book,
Yeah.
because that one's pretty good. um, I'd have to say that the the Ginger Rogers house was interesting because we did several. I had teams come in, and also we had classes. I held classes in there for ghost hunters and for people who just wanted to investigate on their own. So we had
Uh-huh.
multiple people in there with EMF meters and just all kinds of equipment, night vision, and we got a lot of evidence in that
Mhm.
house, just a
Mhm.
ton of evidence. And the scariest thing though that happened
Mhm.
is we heard Ginger Rogers' voice come through the spirit box. We heard her
Right.
mother voice come through the spirit box, and then another one came in, and it was a man.
Mhm.
And uh, during one of the sessions, I started choking. I felt like something was around my neck, and I was choking. So I didn't want to disturb everybody else. So I went in the kitchen and in the back bathroom there, and then I came back out, and my assistant, who was psychic,
Mhm.
is psychic, um, saw me, and she said, "Margie, what is that noose doing around your neck?" And I'm
Whoa.
like, "What?" And another gal who's psychic said she saw it too. And I said, "Well, that's why I'm choking." So I remote viewed the situation, and I saw a tree, and I saw a black man hanging in the tree. It,
Mhm.
he had been killed. And so then I
Wow.
asked Violet about it, and she did some research, and she found out that that property had once been a plantation, and they had slaves,
Mhm.
and it was illegal to kill a slave, but they would protect each other, and they would not give that information up easily.
Mhm.
And the other slaves were probably too afraid to report something like that.
Mhm.
So what I saw, I think, probably really did happen, and he was just trying to let me know that there was a wrong. He was
Mhm.
wronged, and so I went back on my own in the dark by myself in the house, and I contacted him, and I said, "I'm sorry that happened to you. That was a long time ago. There
Mhm.
isn't anything I can do to help you now because it was so long ago." Sometimes they don't have any concept of time either.
Mhm.
So you have to tell them that. And I said, the best thing for you to do is look for the light and go with your family.
Mhm.
And it never happened again. I think he crossed over.
Interesting. Very interesting. Wow. So to find out that to go that far back in the history of the property, Violet, how did that work? I mean, obviously, no, there's not a lot of records around for that, or are there?
There are. You're not as likely to find out necessarily who residents are when
Mhm.
you go back to, say, early to mid 1800s,
Mhm.
but you will definitely still be able, unless there's been some kind of fire, which is honestly pretty rare when it comes to recorder of deeds. So this is a deed transfer. So if you ever owned a house, you bought it from somebody, right?
Mhm.
So that person that you bought it from, their name is written down in association with the legal description of your property. They
Mhm.
bought it from somebody. The county you live in has that recorded. It goes all the way back to the original land patent
Mhm.
that would have been the first person to take ownership of that property from the federal government. So, this wasn't where we are right now. It was Spain, it was France, it was indigenous land.
Right.
It wasn't the United States. So once it became the United States, to have ownership, you had to go through that process with the federal government. And then,
Mhm.
yeah, there's an actual traceable deed process to go all the way to the current owner. I like to go backwards, but that's why I say you write down everything you can, because you can go forward, you can go back, you can go. It
Mhm.
depends on how your records um, are kept in the county. So interest where we live, our main county courthouse, the records go backwards, which is what I prefer. But
Mhm.
if you live in Kansas City proper, if your property's in Kansas City proper, you have to go to the Kansas City county office, and that's where those records are held, and they go forward, which is kind
Mhm.
of a nightmare with research, because I have to find out who owned it in 1820 so I can get to who owned it in 1910. And that's frustrating. But, and the only other way to possibly find residents too is, again, newspapers. People used to put their addresses were put in the newspapers. They had a tea party with their Aunt Lula, who came out to visit from New Hampshire. It would be in the newspaper in a couple days.
Interesting. Very interesting. Has there been a case where, children were involved that it was a kind of like a kid going through puberty? Because I have this thing about, informing people, and I like to inform people about stuff that's out there. When a child goes through puberty, what happens generally?
Well, their hormones go crazy and their emotions are crazy. And a lot of times that manifests in the form of energy. And then they can cause things to happen even if they are not aware of it. They can make things move. They can make things levitate. They can have dishes. I had one case with a teenager. I think they were like 14 years old, and everything seemed to happen when that kid was in the house. When the kid was out of the house, nothing happened. And they even had all of the kitchen cabinets fly open at once, and all the dishes fly out into the middle of the room. We're talking about stuff like that. Right. And so I sat and talked to the family for a few minutes, and I knew immediately what was going on. And I explained it to the child and the parents. And she started to calm down, and I asked her what things were bothering her. It turned out she was being bullied at school. And so that was what, all this emotion was about. And I just gave her some ideas, and they called me back in a couple of weeks, and they said it wasn't going on anymore.
Oh, interesting. I guess that happened, but once they get through that, it does stop. But I know there's historical, and what I have for that, and it's funny because sometimes it's hard to explain to people what's going on. But what I have is I have a VHS tape of the Waltons. Because there's this thing called, there's this segment of that called The Changeling. And it's Elizabeth going through puberty.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen that.
Puberty. Yeah. So I keep a copy of it for people. And then the store lady, Godsey lady, is the one that tells Olivia what's going on, because Olivia thinks they can't figure it out. The family can't figure it out. And then she tells her what's going on with her. But it's called The Changeling. So you might want to check it out. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I will. Good. Sounds interesting.
How about little kids that have psychic abilities? Let's talk about that a little bit. Little children.
There are more and more what we're calling star seeds that are being born now. I'd say in the last 20 years, and it seems like every year that goes by, the most recent children are more psychic, and they've got more abilities. That they might be prodigies. They might start talking at 6 months of age. Extremely intelligent, very high IQs. I think this is something else going on. So if you want to go down that rabbit hole, we can. I think we've got souls coming in, and there are extraterrestrials involved. And I call them our star family. And they're coming in right now because this is a major time in human history. We are going through some big changes. One of the things is major truths are coming out. But the ETs are making themselves known big time. And that is their agenda. I am in contact with some ETs, Valiant Thor being the main one. And he told me that very, very soon, and this was last year, it's already started, but I think we're only a couple of months away from a mass reveal, meaning ships all over the planet, so that there is absolutely no question what's going on, that there are other intelligent beings besides us in the universe, and we have got to get used to that fact.
Really?
Now, these kids coming in know this, and they're
Mhm.
telling their parents that.
That's interesting. That's interesting. And how are they just going to show up? Now we're going down that rabbit hole. Are they just going to show
Well,
up, or
they've been showing up. People
okay,
who have psychic abilities or who are just open to the idea have seen. There's just millions of people who've
right,
seen UFOs or seen and conversed with extraterrestrials like I do, but
right,
there are many other people who have too. So for
mhm,
us, it's not a big surprise. It's just the rest of the world who's in 3D, they've got to
mhm,
get used to 5D because
mhm,
it's coming. And those of us coming in now and the star children coming in now are here to help everybody else deal with this
mhm,
because there are some people that are going to have a hard time dealing with it. But I really feel like these younger children coming in now are here to help people deal with the new world
mhm,
because it's everything changes when I mean, it's one thing if the government finally admits there are UFOs, there are things out there we can't explain,
right,
and they change the word to UAPs, okay?
mhm,
And there's a whole another thing when somebody gets up in front of an audience and says, "Oh, yeah, there are extraterrestrials and they've been here for a long time on the earth." That's a whole different issue because a lot of people can't deal with that.
mhm, mhm. Do you think that they're already here?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I
Absolutely,
always,
no question.
I always think it's going to be a vision that it's going to be somebody in your neighborhood. You don't realize it, but it's some kind of hybrid, and they're going to come
Oh,
out,
yeah.
and you're going to find all this out.
That could very well be because there are hybrids, and
Mhm.
I've even seen some people who are reptilian hybrids, and their eyes will shift to a reptilian eye or eyes, and then go back.
Mhm.
I've seen that a number of times. I've even seen it happen with celebrities when
Mhm.
watching them on TV or they're doing a commercial, and you
Mhm.
see that like, okay, that's it just shifts out of phase for a moment. And some people have actually seen a reptilian face or some other feature that happens just for a minute. It's
Right.
like they're in this cloaking as a human.
Yeah.
And I think because, well, yeah, I don't want to get into why, but
Right.
it's a long story. But there's a lot of stuff coming this year.
Do you think we're ready for it?
Some of us are. I am.
Yeah. I
You
am
know.
too. I've been ready for a while. I wish they'd fix me. I got health stuff. Come fix me.
Oh
You know.
yeah, the med beds. You know, they just actually I heard they just found a bunch of med beds that had been hidden, so they're bringing them out. I've got one. I've got a Tesla med bed that I purchased, and
Right.
yeah, it's all about frequency. They'll be they'll be teaching us and training us, and people will be healthier. I think they're really going to help with that.
Mhm.
It's already started in a lot of ways. People channel in a
Mhm.
lot of ways.
Mhm. Mhm. I can see that happening. I think it's been a gradual thing to where it's kind of like ghost hunting was. When I first started ghost hunting 20 years ago, I
Hmm.
remember when you walked into when we were filming somewhere, and we would have to walk into to a city to the city and say, "Hey, we're going to be filming." It's kind of like you were looking at the ground, going, "Oh, I'm looking for ghosts." It was really something that nobody talked about. And then, and I
Hmm.
hate to say it, as the TV shows came out, then it became
Yeah.
cool. It became hip to be a ghost hunter. So people would go, "Oh yeah, I love it. Can I come down there and watch you guys do this?" But at first, it was one
Yeah.
of these things where you were really shy about who you told about it, right? And that's how I think with what's
Yeah.
going on with the aliens coming and all this. I think it's been a gradual buildup, so that nobody's going to be all that overly shocked.
Yeah, I mean, look at the movies and TV shows
Yeah,
uh, about that stuff. You
yeah,
mentioned the towns and the hauntings, and you're
mhm,
getting a permit or something to do your um, the a lot of towns now have finally figured out that they can make money with their real haunted houses. I mean, Violet knows about that. Um, didn't you have a case where a town needed to find a way to earn money and bring money in, and then they changed their minds about some things?
Yeah, yeah, they were facing a bit of a bankruptcy situation, and they decided, someone came up with the idea, hey, what if we had ghost tours? And I said, well, we'll put out a message to everyone in the town to contact us with why their house is haunted. And they were bombarded. And so now they have this huge nearly ghost tour, and they're doing well financially.
They can. They can. In fact, I've done ghost tours in the past where I've given stuff back to the hotel, the old hotel. When we're taking like 2% and the hotel gets the rest. And they can do really well financially. In fact, there's a lot of places that charge you to go that are exorbitant now because a lot of these groups will pay it as well. But it's a good way for them to make money and capitalize off it and to bring tourism in, even though
It
even
is.
though it's yeah.
It's great too for historic preservation.
Yes.
It's becoming a member of a historic society, a board. That is something that's getting harder and harder to get people to join into doing that. Younger
Right.
people are just busy, and I don't know. I don't think I'm young, but I'm like one of the youngest members of most of the historical societies I belong to, and
Right.
so trying to find ways to get people involved and see the value of this building that needs a lot of repair or work or love. You have to sometimes meet them where they're at. And if that's what they're interested in and they're not interested in reenacting a tea party, then why not?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I just think it's great how it's done that. I think it's great how that turnaround from being, where it's almost a secret to want to do this, has turned into something so big now for people.
Oh, it has, and the TV shows, like you said, are no doubt the impetus for that.
Hmm.
And I just think, of course, I don't agree with everything they do
I
on
don't
some of
even.
these shows, especially the very very aggressive ones.
Right.
I don't suggest that at all. Antagonizing the ghosts, that's not a good
Yeah.
idea.
No. No. Well, I remember when a certain show came out, and I remember going into some place and saying, "Hey, we're ghost hunters. We understand, and this is like an opera house kind of place or whatever, they would look at us real funny, and I'd say, "No, we're not the guys that jump out of windows. We don't do that. That's not our gig."
And
So
we
I'm not
don't
going to
yell
say
at
who
them.
I'm not going to say who it was. I'm just saying.
Mm.
I
I
think
know.
everybody
We all
knows.
know. We know.
Everyone knows who it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I remember having to go out there and just
Yeah.
apologize and go, "Look, we don't do that stuff. I know you see that on TV. It's not like that." Do you find it easier to get into places?
Easier to get into places?
Yeah, yeah. Like if you're doing a commercial place, you go to an old hotel, that you want to investigate or look into. Do you find it easier
They
to get there?
they usually call me. I mean, I don't address them. They usually
Right.
call me because they've got a problem.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we get that down too. I mean, but at first when we were doing it, we had to write little letters and go, "This is what we like to do. This is where we've been. Let us come in and investigate." But now it's not like that
Mm.
anymore. They call me. I agree, 100%. What's
I'm
it
going to
like
do
for
one
you
in
as?
Galveston next month. We're
Yeah.
gonna spend the night there.
Oh, that's cool.
Hmm.
Very cool. See? Yeah, we're
And
getting
it's
ready to
just
get out and do some stuff too as well. I'm excited. What
cool.
what hotel intrigues you the most? If there's a place, you see all these TV shows of these different haunted places. If you had a choice of the Mount Rushmore of haunted places, what would it be for you?
Just hotels or
No, it could
anything.
be anything. Could be any place at all. Just what would be the
Um,
ultimate place for you
I'd
to
have
go?
to say the Lyric Theater in Kansas City.
Why is that?
That, and then there's also a hotel right next to it.
Okay.
It is so haunted that every single night that there's a performance, a ghost of a woman shows up in the middle of the theater, and she's wearing early 1900s clothing, and long dress, hat, the whole bit.
Mhm.
She sits there for a few minutes. Everybody thinks she's just a person, and she's usually the first one there. So everybody goes in, everybody sits down, and then at some point, she just vaporizes into thin air and scares everybody around her. That's a good one. I think she just plans that every time. And then
That's
there's
awesome.
also some type of a spirit behind the stage,
Uh-huh.
probably a stage hand. And sometimes he's done some things. He's thrown lights down and things like that. Uh, so they have to be careful there.
Mhm.
And then there's a hotel right next to it. I think it's the President Hotel. Can't
Mhm.
remember for sure.
Stay there.
There is a certain room where anybody who has been in there is haunted. The water comes on the sink by itself. The lights go out and won't come back on. Uh, you know, they have the bedclothes pulled off of them. So they don't rent that out to anybody unless
Mhm.
they specifically say, I want to investigate that. I want to stay in that haunted room. Then they'll say, okay, you're not getting your money back. And they said usually about 2 o'clock in the morning, they come running down saying, that's enough. Keep the
That's
money.
funny. That's
Yeah.
funny. I think theaters are fun. I think opera houses, theaters, those actors don't want to leave because they have such a good time there.
Yeah.
Tons of
Yeah.
activity.
That's their life.
Yeah,
Actors and musicians, they get
yeah,
so involved in their business that they just love that.
yeah.
Yeah. They
Tons
don't
and
want to.
tons of activity. Tons.
Yeah.
What do you think of those old buildings, Victoria?
What's that?
What do you think of those old buildings like that? Is that exciting for you to go in and do the double research on those? I would think it would be.
The funny thing is, most of the time that those old buildings get researched is because they're working to get national designation status,
Yeah.
and so that they can get tax credits for the repairs and improvements that are needed. However it gets done, that's great.
Right.
But unless it's something, that has um, something specific to the history of where you live, I don't know that anyone's going to necessarily do the research on them. I've done research on commercial buildings,
Mhm.
mostly small retail buildings, but it's always a little bit more fun because you've all these different businesses that have been in there, and there's more to find usually in newspapers, even if it's just advertisements. And
Mhm. Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
yeah, it's a good time. By the way, I did stay at that hotel, Margie, so I'm
Oh,
not surprised.
did something happen to you while you were there?
No, but like the place has the vibes that you're just
Mm,
expecting it.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah. Absolutely.
I
There.
apologize. I called you Victoria. I meant Violet.
that's
Something
okay.
I
Violet
heard a voice say
Victoria.
I heard a voice say go Victoria in my head, and I thought Victoria first thing in my head. So all right,
Well,
sorry,
that's odd
Margie.
because I used to have a store named Victoria's on the
See,
square,
maybe
There
I'm
you have it.
you know
and
yeah
that was haunted. Oh
yeah.
my gosh, was that place haunted? Uh, we had a. I was doing I wrote a book called Haunted Independence, and so I
Right.
was doing a class and selling the book, and so I don't know, there were maybe 15, 20 people there,
Uh huh.
and of course it's kind of dark,
Right.
and all of a sudden everybody in the audience just screamed, and there was a floating head over to my right. Did the
Wow.
floating head again? I did. Anyway, it was just this apparition floating there, and then he laughed at everybody and then backed up into the wall, and I'm trying to calm them down, and then everybody else is saying, who's behind you behind those curtains? And the
Mhm.
curtains just went back to my office. They didn't go anywhere else. And I said, there's nobody back there. And they go, oh yeah, a man peeked his head around the curtains. So I
Wow.
went back there and looked. There was nobody there. And those people got up and left, and they that would never come to my classes again. Um, and that building, oh, that was so haunted. Stuff like that happened all the time. I couldn't wait to get out of there. I was in a 3-year lease. We had to wait 3 years to get out of that place. It was crazy. But
Yeah.
So
I wanted to tell you something about
sure,
what Violet found out about the house in Springfield.
sure.
I mentioned earlier about how my sister was in the room, and then later she saw an apparition of an older lady in her dressing room mirror, and then she turned around and there was nobody there.
Uh-huh.
Well, about 10 years ago, I went back to that house just to see if it was still haunted. I took my friend Donna with me. We walk up on the steps. All of the windows, the shades are open. There's nothing in the house. It's vacant. And so I thought, oh, let me just try anyway, see what happens. So I ring the doorbell, and the light in the parlor, which is, we could see the whole thing to my left, there was nobody in there. The light came on. I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Let's just wait here a minute. Pretty soon, this older lady in a long to the floor, old fashioned dress, high neck black collar with a cane comes around the corner and stares at us. And she looked 100% solid. And then she just faded out. My girlfriend saw that. Just, that's enough for me. And she ran down the steps to the car. And so I told Violet about those incidents and others that had happened there. And she found something very interesting. Now, remember, my sister's name was Alice.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I didn't have all the details on the house. So I knew a little bit about this very specific story about when they moved in and there was a body in the bed that was not her sister. So I'm researching the house, and I found one of the residents. She had come over from France. She was immigrated from France, and she was a widow at the time she lived in the house. And what I saw next, just see, you have to understand, I don't get hired usually to research a house because it's haunted. So this is extra special, exciting for me to be doing this. She had a daughter. She had a young daughter whose name was Alice, the same as Margie's sister.
Wow.
She also was a seamstress by trade. That's how she was keeping, making ends meet with as a widow. And Margie's mother was a professional seamstress. This woman was very connected to their family. She's like, you're a seamstress, I'm a seamstress. Your daughter's name Alice, my daughter's name is Alice. And it really made things click.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah. Absolutely.
She was very attached to that house. And also, I went by recently. I've been by there 3 times since I moved out a long time ago. It's vacant every time. And the last time I was there, which was just last year, there, as soon as I hit the street, there's this dark, heavy energy. Really, really, it was so thick, it's like going through fog, even though it was a bright, sunny day. I'm like, there's this darkness around. Well, one of the things we found is that right across the street was Drury College, where a Civil War battle occurred, which probably included the house, that land too, where the house was. And then right around the corner, about 2 blocks away, is Pythian Castle, which is this huge mansion built out of stone, and it is open for ghost tours only. That's all they do because it's so haunted. And I just think that all of this energy is feeding off of each other to make that place, just keeping the energy there and keeping the people there that are spirits. And I think that you would find that almost anywhere if that was the case, if there was all this dark energy of things happening, because I think there was a murder in the house. I think when I saw the woman in a black dress killing a younger woman in a white dress, I think that probably really happened, and it's not in the records. But that's dark energy. When somebody's murdered, that is, that the spirit of the person who's murdered is still going to be hanging around because they want resolution.
Absolutely. So what's next for you guys again?
What's next?
Yeah, what you got up to next?
Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
So I would say for what's next for us, we both obviously, Margie has the network, she has the magazine. We both write for the magazine, blog for the network. I'm working on a piece of fiction actually that I gave myself preset deadline for a draft in September. So that'll go to Margie.
Okay,
Well,
cool.
we are working on some films too. And so, yeah, we've got a project that I was talking to your dad about, Violet. He's our senior videographer for the network. And he wants in on, we're doing a film called Portals.
Okay.
And it's about real portals in different locations. And so there's going to be an investigation and filming of that. And he wants to get Violet in on that, doing some filming. So
now
Very
I know
cool.
what I'm doing this summer.
just today,
Very
yeah,
cool. Very cool.
just thought I'd tell you now on the air.
Hey,
that's what we're
it's a
doing.
great way to find out what my summer plans are. Didn't make any yet, so we're good.
Okay.
How can people find you?
Nextnetwork.com, and margiekay.com. And
I'm listed on
you're
the network,
on,
yeah.
yeah, you're on the network too.
So
Violet's on the network. You can contact us there.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
thank you for having us.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right. Well, have a great one, okay?
You too.
Good
We'll try to
night.
get you back on sometime.
Okay.
Wonderful.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
New buttons. There we go. Okay. All right. Wow, look at how low I am. I feel so short. Look at this. I'm gonna have to fix this. This is not gonna work. Anyway, that was a great interview. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and yeah, we're gonna be moving on tonight, and meet me around 7:15 over at TikTok, California Haunts TikTok, and I'll be doing some readings for you guys, past, present, future 3 cards. Also, just a quick thing that happened today that was unexpected. I did an interview for sfgate.com. I did an interview about the Haunted Carey House Hotel in Placerville, California, and so that's going to be coming out on Saturday. So I'm real excited about that, and I can't wait to have you guys see that. So I'm real excited about that. But anyhow, yeah, I will be back tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. Pacific for my interview, and I got to read this message that this person sent. And if you guys saw the message, I got to screenshot that before I go off. I got to with Jon Stewart. We're going to be talking about the alien interview, and I heard him on another show the other night. He was really good, and that's why I wanted to get him on. So join me tomorrow at 5:30 p.m. Pacific. I'll have this fixed, so I'm up higher. You know, I'm gonna be a little taller. Don't want to be a little elfin. And we'll get all the bugs out of this. But my dog bumped into the back, is what happened, and then everything got off balance. But anyway, I will see you guys tomorrow, 5:30 p.m. Pacific, for Jon Stewart. Also, yeah, check out that article. All right. And Friday, we're going to have Gingerbread House build that we're going to be doing. It's going to be Valentine/Christmas gingerbread house build. That'll be at 3 p.m. Pacific. And then Nancy Matz will be with us Friday at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, like as usual for Casual Friday. And then we'll be back over at TikTok at 7 p.m. Pacific for readings. Okay? I'll see you guys, and have a great rest of your night, and see you in about 45 minutes. Bye.